hat is fabulous.
Ma'am?
How about if we don't give
Ma'am.
us a ticket today and just a warning?
License and registration.
Okay.
This your monkey?
The Truck Monkey, a revolutionary idea you'll only find at Suburban Auto Group.
I will have order in this court.
Your Honor, anyone can claim to be a Christian. The simple truth is that many people in America today claim to have some sort of religious belief.
Objection, Your Honor. We're not here to discuss the rest of America's religious propensity.
Objection sustained.
Mrs. Saved, on what grounds do you base your previous statement that you are a follower of Christ?
I have repented of my sins and asked Jesus to reside within me, making me a new person.
A new person, Mrs. Saved. What was wrong with the old person?
The old person was involved in drug abuse, promiscuity, and very unreliable, unable to hold a job.
And the new person?
The new person is thankful for the Lord for forgiving my sins, giving me a fresh start, so I find myself never growing tired of doing what's right.
No further questions.
Counsel, do you wish to cross-examine?
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to call its first witness to the stand. The defense calls Mrs. Neighborly to the stand.
Remember, Mrs. Neighborly, you're under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mrs. Neighborly, are you acquainted with the defendant, Miss Saved, and what you pointed out to the court?
Yes, and she's sitting over there at the defense table.
And how long have you been acquainted with Mrs. Saved?
Objection, Your Honor. What difference does it make how long Mrs. Neighborly has been acquainted with the defendant?
Objection overruled. You may continue, Counselor.
Mrs. Neighborly, please answer the question.
I've been acquainted with Mrs. Saved for nearly 7 years now.
Would you please describe your first encounter with Mrs. Saved?
It was about 7 years ago. I remember Mrs. Saved and her family moving in next door. Her language was terrible. Every word coming out of her mouth was a cuss word. There was a lot of yelling and fighting going on in the home as well.
And how would you describe Mrs. Saved's vocabulary now?
Not only has it improved 100%, but I noticed Mrs. Saved and her family going out and having fun. When I say hi to them, they actually have what they call a praise report to share with me.
Thank you, Mrs. Neighborly. You may step down. The defense calls Mr. Workham to the stand.
I remind you, Mr. Workham, you're under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Workham, does your company employ Mrs. Saved?
Yes, that's correct.
How long had Mrs. Saved been working for your company, and do you work closely with her?
About 3.5 years now, and I have been working closely with her the whole time she's been with the company.
Can you describe for me Mrs. Saved's personality from the time you first hired her to the time right now?
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Workham isn't recognized by this court as a trained psychologist. Defense is asking Mr. Workham for his diagnosis of Mrs. Saved's personality type.
Your Honor, the point I'm attempting to show this courtroom is that the major change in a person's life will also become apparent in the workplace as well as the home or out in the community.
Objection overruled. You may proceed.
Mr. Workham, go ahead and answer the question.
Well, when we first hired her, something told me to give this lady a fair chance, so I did. The first year she was late quite a few times. Her language was rough. As a matter of fact, we went over the sexual harassment law on 2 separate occasions, then something started to change.
Go ahead, Mr. Workham, continue.
Well, it was like a different lady came through the door each morning. She was neat and clean, never late, didn't complain about last-minute changes in work orders. She didn't use foul language anymore. She refused to listen to gossip and never has anything bad to say about anyone. Heck, I wish I had 5 more like her.
And is there anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Workham?
When I asked her what came over her, she told me she met someone. She said that this new friend loved her no matter what and forgave her her sins and wanted to have a personal relationship with her. Oh, there's one more thing. We went to the store for lunch last week. Mrs. Save turned right around and went back into the store and returned the overpayment she got from the clerk.
Objection, Your Honor. Only God can forgive sins. I've never heard God speak. How many?
Mr. Finger Pointer, I believe I have enough information to make my decision. We'll take a short recess.
Mr. Workham, does your company employ Miss...
3, 2, 3, 2.
Today claim they have some quotes.
Close enough. It'll do.
You can say present.
3, 2.
Today claim some to have some sort of religious belief. I can't do this.
2.
And the new person? That's it.
Good. You wouldn't make the comment after or move away.
Trying to smack them both.
Okay.
3, 2. 3, 2.
Objection, Your Honor. Mrs. Workham isn't recognized by this court as a trained psychologist.
Stop.
Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Workham isn't recognized by this court as a trained psychologist.
3, 2.
The old person was involved in drug abuse, promiscuity. I can't say that word.
Promiscuity.
2.
Objection, Your Honor. We're not here to discuss America's propensity.
3, 2.
And how would you describe...
3, 2.
Thank you, Mrs. Neighborly. You may step down. The defense calls Mrs.
Mister.
3, 2.
Yes, Your Honor.